friends, I'm Pastor Carrie. Welcome to Sunday School. I am really glad that we get to spend these few moments together thinking about the story. We are on chapter 7. The battle begins. The battle begins. The Israelites wandered around for another 40 years, and then it was time for Joshua to lead them into the land God had promised. Let's take our story card and get started. This is a little bit unique. Today's main character is a place. Is the place called Jericho. The city of Jericho had a huge wall around it. It was pretty intimidating. It seemed pretty impossible, but we're going to see what God did in that impossible situation. Here's our key verse. Be strong and be very brave. Make sure you obey the whole law. Then you will have success everywhere you go. And then just a little bit of information. God told the Israelites to march around the walls of the city. Sometimes God's plans, it's said in our story this week that sometimes God's plans are unusual, and that Joshua had traveled with God for so long, had followed God for so long. He trusted God, and he trusted even when the plan was a little unusual. Yeah, that's good information for us, isn't it? That's a great example. There we go. A great example of someone who asked for those ancient paths, found the good way, the way that leads to rest for our souls. Joshua had followed God and trusted God even when the plan was a little bit unusual. Another way of saying that is even when the plan doesn't make sense to us, we are trusting God's wisdom and God's ways. And that's the story of Jericho and Joshua. It says, on the seventh day, on the seventh circuit, when they blew the trumpets, the walls fell down. God made what was seemingly impossible possible. So let's get right into it and think about our two ancient questions. We're asking for the ancient paths, looking in the story for all of the characters and their examples to us of following after God, of obeying God, of being faithful, of responding to God's faithfulness to us, God's promises to us. Who is God and what is God asking us to do? I have a little book. It's just simply called Fairy Tales. Maybe you have a book similar to this. There's all sorts of books about fairy tales. Stories that require a lot of our imagination. And we really like those stories, don't we? We like them because in those stories, the things that seem impossible all of a sudden become possible. Yeah, and you know why we like those stories? I want to let you in on a little secret. You know why we love fairy tales so much? Is because they remind us of the truth that is our life with God. With God, nothing is impossible. Even strong, tall walls around a city like Jericho are not impossible with God. And they're not impossible even when God's plan is a little bit unusual. Walking around, eventually blowing trumpets and shouting loud. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? It sounds like a lot of fun, blowing trumpets and shouting out loud. That was God's plan. So who is God? God makes all things possible. Things that seem impossible with us are possible with God. And who is God? Let's share this wonderful verse from Joshua, from the book of Joshua. I am the Lord your God. I will be with you everywhere you go. I will be with you everywhere you go. Who is God? God makes the impossible possible. Who is God? God is with us everywhere we go. Everywhere we go, God is with us, making the impossible possible. What does God require of us? Well, two things. God requires us to be brave and strong. Think about fairy tales again. Think about your favorite make-believe stories. Why do we love them so much? Well, because the impossible becomes possible, and because the characters get to be brave and strong, and they almost always have help. It usually never happens that the strength and the bravery, the courage is of their own doing. They always need help. And isn't that like us? We long to be brave and strong. We want to be brave and strong disciples of Jesus. And we need to believe the truth about bravery and strength and courage. And the truth about bravery and courage and strength is that it comes from God. It comes from God. God is who makes us brave. God is who makes us strong. God is who gives us strength. And here's another thing I want to make sure we don't miss. Joshua was obedient. The priests and the soldiers who marched around Jericho, remember, it was an unusual plan, but they trusted and were obedient. And that is where so much of their strength and courage, their bravery came from, was their obedience to God, their trust in God. And friends, it's the same for you and me. The strength and the courage we long to have comes from God, and it comes when we are obedient to God, when we say in our hearts, with our mouth, and then our actions show that we are committed to doing things God's way and not just our way. We are committed to doing things God's way. We are obedient to God, even when the plan is a little bit unusual. All right, friends, thank you for being here. It's so good for us to be together. Know that you are prayed for. I am praying for all of us. Our church is praying for all of us, that we are brave and strong in the strength of God throughout this very unusual time. Our story tells us that the Israelites wandered around because they needed some time to learn to trust God. Isn't that true for us? We're wandering around in this pandemic a little bit, and let's use this time to learn, to maybe relearn to trust God. God is everywhere we go, and God is with us today in this moment. You are so loved. I pray you are filled with the peace of Christ. All right, friends, jump into chapter 8, and we're going to be together again next week. Bye-bye.